The cleaning cart squeaked as I pushed it down the polished hallway of Sterling Enterprises. My reflection glided alongside me on the glass walls of the conference rooms, a ghost in gray uniform carrying the invisible weight of a life I once had. The executive floor was always the quietest at 7 in the evening, just how I liked it. Everyone had gone home except for those chasing promotions or hiding from their families. Neither group noticed the cleaning lady. I hummed softly as I emptied the trash bin beside Maxwell Sterling's mahogany desk. His office was unnecessarily large, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering cityscape. Family photos adorned one wall, smiling children and a beautiful wife, their faces turned toward someone they believed was a good man. Appearances could be deceiving. I'd learned that lesson the hard way. The door swung open without warning. Maxwell Sterling himself burst in, his tailored suit slightly rumpled and a fine sheen of sweat on his forehead. He stopped abruptly when he saw me, as if surprised to find another human being in his domain after hours. "You," he said, pointing at me like I was an object rather than a person. "What's your name?" I straightened, instinctively pulling my shoulders back, a habit from my previous life that was hard to break. "Melissa. Melissa Blackwell, sir." His eyes narrowed slightly as he studied my face. "You've been cleaning this floor for... how long now?" 6 months, sir. 6 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days, to be precise. Not that it mattered to him. Maxwell paced the length of his office, running his fingers through his salt and pepper hair. "Melissa, I have a situation. An emergency." He stopped and turned to me with an intensity that made me take a step back. "The Zhao delegation from China is here for the contract signing tomorrow. The most important deal of the year, possibly of my career." I nodded politely, wondering why the CEO of Sterling Enterprises was sharing business details with the cleaning staff. My wife was supposed to join us as hostess for the evening. Cultural expectations, you understand. These Chinese businessmen, they bring their wives. They expect to see mine. He waved his hand dismissively. "Caroline has taken ill. Food poisoning. She can't make it. I'm sorry to hear that, sir." I moved to continue my cleaning, but he stepped directly into my path. "Here's what's going to happen," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper despite us being alone. "You're going to be my wife tonight." The trash bag I was holding slipped from my fingers, spilling paper clips and crumpled sticky notes across the polished floor. "Excuse me?" "Not literally," Maxwell said, rolling his eyes. "Just for the meeting. You'll dress appropriately, smile, shake hands, and not say a word unless directly addressed. In which case, you'll defer to me." He reached for his wallet. "I'll pay you $500 for 3 hours of your time. That's more than you make in a week, isn't it?" The casual arrogance of his assumption made my blood simmer. 5 years ago, I would have billed $500 for 30 minutes of my time as a corporate attorney. I had negotiated contracts worth millions, argued cases before judges, and closed deals that made men like Maxwell Sterling rich. But that was before everything fell apart. "Sir, I don't think..." "1,000, he said sharply, misinterpreting my hesitation as negotiation. "Final offer. The meeting starts in 2 hours. He checked his watch. "Valencia will help you find something suitable to wear. I need this to work, Melissa." For the first time since he'd burst into the room, I truly looked at Maxwell Sterling. Behind the imperious tone and entitled demeanor, I saw genuine desperation in his eyes. Whatever this deal was, it mattered to him beyond money. There was fear there too, the kind that keeps powerful men awake at night. "May I ask what this meeting is about?" I ventured cautiously. Maxwell's expression softened slightly, perhaps surprised by my interest. "Sterling Enterprises needs this partnership with Zhao Industries. The economy is turning, and we're overextended. This deal secures our future, and the jobs of over 3,000 employees. 3,000 people. Families, mortgages, children's college funds, retirements. All potentially riding on whether I played pretend wife for an evening. The magnitude wasn't lost on me. "Fine," I said quietly. "I'll do it." The relief on his face was immediate and almost boyish. "Excellent. Valencia will meet you in the executive bathroom in 10 minutes. Don't worry about the cleaning. I'll have someone else finish your shift." As I turned to leave, Maxwell added, "And Melissa, thank you. This means more than you know. If only he knew what I knew. If only he understood who he was really asking to sit at his table tonight. Valencia Reyes was waiting for me when I arrived at the executive bathroom, a garment bag draped over her arm and a determined expression on her face. I had seen her around the building before, always impeccably dressed, always moving with purpose. She was Maxwell's right hand, the gatekeeper to his kingdom. "So you're our last-minute Mrs. Sterling," she said, giving me a critical once-over. Mr. Sterling explained the situation. "We don't have much time." The executive bathroom was larger than my entire apartment, with a separate vanity area complete with shower. Valencia hung the garment bag on a hook and unzipped it to reveal a stunning midnight blue dress. "This should fit. Caroline and you are approximately the same size," she said, her tone businesslike. "She keeps several emergency outfits here for unexpected events." Of course she did. The wealthy lived in a different world, one where backup designer dresses hung in office bathrooms just in case. "Valencia," I began hesitantly as I accepted the dress. "Should I be worried about this meeting?" Mr. Sterling seemed unusually concerned. Her perfectly manicured fingers paused on the zipper. "The Zhao delegation represents our largest potential overseas expansion. The negotiations have been difficult. We've been working on this deal for 18 months. She looked at me directly. "If it falls through, there will be layoffs. Significant ones. Including cleaning staff, I imagined. The lowest rung on the corporate ladder was always the first to go." "I understand," I said quietly. "I'll do my best." "Good. Now hurry. We need to transform you from," she gestured vaguely at my uniform, "this, into someone who belongs at Maxwell Sterling's side." An hour later, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. The midnight blue dress fit surprisingly well, its elegant cut making me look taller and more refined. Valencia had worked magic with makeup, bringing color to my face that had been absent for years. My brown hair, usually pulled back in a practical ponytail, now fell in soft waves around my shoulders. "You clean up well," Valencia remarked, sounding genuinely impressed. "Here." She handed me a velvet box. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a small diamond pendant. The final touch, Mr. Sterling insisted. As she fastened it around my neck, our eyes met in the mirror. "Just smile and nod," she advised. "Mr. Liu will be translating everything. The Chinese delegation speaks very little English, so you won't have to worry about conversation." Mr. Liu, the translator. Something tickled at the back of my mind. A familiar name, perhaps? I couldn't place it. "What exactly will happen at this meeting?" I asked, slipping on the heels Valencia had provided, another item from Caroline Sterling's emergency wardrobe. "It's mostly ceremonial at this point. The actual contract signing is tomorrow. Tonight is about building relationship and trust." Valencia checked her watch. "They're traditional businessmen who believe in looking a potential partner in the eye before sealing a deal. Having you there shows respect for their customs." As we walked toward the conference room, I felt a flutter of anxiety in my stomach. It had been so long since I'd been in a business setting as anything other than the invisible woman who emptied trash cans and wiped down surfaces. Part of me, a part I thought had died with my mother, sparked with interest. We paused outside the double doors of the main conference room. Through the glass, I could see Maxwell speaking with a group of Chinese businessmen in formal attire. Among them was a face that made my heart stop. Jackson Liu, the translator, the man who had been my classmate at law school 10 years ago, the man who knew exactly who I was and what I was capable of. "Ready?" Valencia asked, mistaking my shock for nervousness. I swallowed hard and nodded. There was no backing out now. Whatever game fate was playing with me tonight, I had no choice but to see it through. Maxwell looked up as we entered, relief washing over his features. "Ah, here she is," he said warmly, extending his hand to me. "Gentlemen, my wife." Jackson Liu's eyes widened fractionally as they met mine, a flash of recognition quickly masked by professional indifference. He gave no other indication that he knew me as he began translating Maxwell's introduction. I smiled demurely and took my seat beside Maxwell, my mind racing. What was Jackson doing here? Last I'd heard, he was working at a prestigious law firm specializing in international business. Now he was a translator for Chinese investors? Something didn't add up. Wei Zhao, the leader of the delegation, smiled politely at me and said something in Mandarin. I waited for Jackson to translate, curious what he would say. "Mr. Zhao welcomes you and says you bring beauty to our meeting," Jackson said smoothly. What Wei Zhao had actually said was far more elaborate. a traditional Chinese compliment about harmony and balance being restored by a feminine presence. The translation was accurate in spirit, if not in detail. I nodded graciously, playing my part. For the next hour, I sat quietly as the men discussed the final aspects of their deal. Maxwell was charming and confident, the perfect picture of American business acumen. The Chinese delegation was reserved but engaged, and Jackson translated flawlessly between them. Almost. It was subtle at first, a nuance lost here, an emphasis shifted there. Nothing that would raise alarm to someone who didn't understand both languages. But as the evening progressed, the discrepancies became more pronounced. Jackson was deliberately mistranslating key points of the conversation, particularly when discussion turned to specific contract terms. When Wei Zhao asked about the intellectual property protections in the agreement, Jackson translated it as a question about manufacturing timelines. When another member of the Chinese delegation inquired about exclusivity clauses, Jackson rendered it as a compliment about Sterling Enterprises' impressive growth. Something was very wrong. I kept my expression pleasant and engaged, but inside, my mind was working rapidly, piecing together the puzzle. I needed to see that contract. Whatever game Jackson was playing, it wasn't benefiting either Sterling Enterprises or the Chinese investors. Perhaps we should review the final terms together, Maxwell suggested as servers brought in coffee. Jackson, would you explain the key points to Mr. Zhao and his team? Jackson nodded and began summarizing the contract, which an assistant had brought in. As he spoke in Mandarin, I listened intently, keeping my expression neutral. What I heard made my blood run cold. The contract Jackson was describing to the Chinese delegation was dramatically different from the one Maxwell believed they were signing. Hidden clauses, altered percentages, manufactured loopholes. It was a masterclass in deception. If signed, Sterling Enterprises would be granting Zhao Industries access to their proprietary technology while receiving almost nothing in return. It was a corporate heist, disguised as a partnership, and Jackson Liu was the architect. Mr. Zhao says everything seems to be in order, Jackson translated smoothly, after Wei Zhao made a brief comment. They look forward to tomorrow's official signing. What Wei Zhao had actually said was that he wanted his legal team to review the translated contract one more time before proceeding, a perfectly reasonable request that Jackson had completely fabricated in translation. I had a choice to make. I could remain silent, collect my $1,000, and walk away. Whatever happened to Sterling Enterprises afterward wasn't my concern. I was the cleaning lady, nothing more. But 3,000 jobs, 3,000 lives that would be upended if this deal went sideways. And beyond that, a principle that once meant everything to me. The truth mattered. Maxwell raised his glass in a toast. To new partnerships and prosperous futures, he said, smiling broadly. As glasses clinked around the table, I made my decision. I couldn't sit by and watch this happen. Not when I had the power to stop it. Excuse me, I said softly, placing my hand on Maxwell's arm. May I see the contract briefly? I have a small question. Maxwell looked surprised but handed me the document. Jackson's expression remained neutral, but I caught the slight tensing of his shoulders. I scanned the pages quickly, my training coming back to me like muscle memory. Legal language had once been my native tongue, and my fluency hadn't entirely abandoned me. What I saw confirmed my suspicions. The English version of the contract was legitimate. The fraud was happening entirely in the translation. I set the contract down and took a deep breath. Then I looked directly at Wei Zhao and spoke in perfect Mandarin. Mr. Zhao, I believe there has been a misunderstanding in the translation of this agreement. Would you allow me to clarify a few points? The room fell silent. Jackson's face drained of color. Maxwell's mouth dropped open in shock. And Wei Zhao's eyes widened with surprise before crinkling at the corners with something that looked remarkably like respect. You speak Mandarin, Wei Zhao said in his native tongue, his expression a mixture of surprise and intrigue. I nodded respectfully. I do. I studied in Beijing for 2 years during my law school education. Jackson Liu's composure cracked visibly as he shifted in his seat. Mrs. Sterling, perhaps we should let the professionals handle the technical details, he suggested in English, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. Maxwell stared at me as if I'd suddenly sprouted wings. What's happening? He demanded, looking between me and the Chinese delegation. What did you say to them? I turned to him calmly. Mr. Sterling, I believe there's been a significant misrepresentation in the translation of your agreement. I kept my voice steady and professional. Mr. Liu has not been accurately conveying the terms between parties. The conference room erupted into a flurry of voices, Maxwell demanding explanations, Jackson attempting to regain control, and the Chinese businessmen speaking rapidly among themselves. I remained still in the center of the storm, watching Wei Zhao, who alone had maintained his composure. He raised his hand, and silence fell across the table. "Please," he said in Mandarin, "explain what you mean, Mrs. Sterling." I took a deep breath. There was no turning back now. The contract your team is being asked to sign bears little resemblance to what has been described to you, I explained, maintaining eye contact with Wei Zhao. The intellectual property rights, exclusivity clauses, and revenue-sharing models have all been misrepresented in translation. Wei Zhao's eyes narrowed as he processed this information. He turned to Jackson and spoke rapidly in Mandarin. "Is this true, Mr. Liu? Have you betrayed both parties in this negotiation?" Jackson's face had taken on a sickly pallor. "Mr. Zhao, this woman is merely the cleaning staff. She's clearly confused about—" "I am not confused," I interrupted, switching to English so Maxwell could understand. "And yes, I am the cleaning staff. But before that, I was a corporate attorney, specializing in international business law, with a focus on Chinese-American partnerships." I turned to Maxwell. "Mr. Sterling, I believe Mr. Liu has been working to sabotage this deal in a way that would damage both Sterling Enterprises and Zhao Industries." Maxwell's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "Is this true?" he demanded, glaring at Jackson. "Of course not," Jackson scoffed, attempting to regain his composure. "This is absurd. She's making this up to impress you." Wei Zhao spoke again, this time in heavily accented English. "Perhaps we test." He pointed at the contract on the table. Section 3, Paragraph 2. "You read to me in English. Then she translate to Chinese. Then Mr. Liu translate. We compare." It was a simple but effective way to determine the truth. Maxwell nodded curtly and picked up the contract. Section 3, Paragraph 2. "Sterling Enterprises retains exclusive rights to all proprietary technologies developed during the term of this partnership, with Zhao Industries granted a non-transferable license for implementation within specified markets as outlined in Appendix B." I translated this accurately into Mandarin, my words flowing more easily than I'd expected after years of disuse. When I finished, Wei Zhao looked expectantly at Jackson. The translator hesitated, sweat visibly beading on his forehead. "Mr. Liu," Wei Zhao prompted. Jackson cleared his throat and began translating, but his version claimed that Sterling Enterprises and Zhao Industries would share equal ownership of all technologies, with Zhao Industries having unrestricted rights to license the technology to third parties. The discrepancy was enormous and unmistakable. Even without understanding the language, Maxwell could read the shock on the faces of the Chinese businessmen. "You lied," Wei Zhao said simply, his calm demeanor making the accusation all the more damning. He turned to one of his associates and issued a rapid series of instructions in Mandarin. The man immediately stood and left the room, phone already pressed to his ear. Jackson's professional mask shattered completely. "Mr. Zhao, please, there's been a misunderstanding. Perhaps my grasp of certain legal terminologies. You graduated top of your class at Columbia Law School and worked for 5 years at Morgan & Price, specializing in international business law," I said quietly. "Your grasp of legal terminology is excellent in both languages." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to me. "How do you know that?" Maxwell asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I kept my gaze fixed on Jackson. "Because we were classmates. We graduated the same year. We even worked on the law review together." I allowed myself a small, bitter smile. "You probably didn't recognize me at first, Jackson. It's been a long time, and I've changed considerably." Recognition finally dawned fully in Jackson's eyes. "Melissa Blackwell," he breathed, more to himself than to the room. You were headed for partnership at Thornton and Associates." "Yes," I said simply. "I was." Wei Zhao was watching this exchange with keen interest. "Perhaps," he suggested, "we should pause this meeting. Resume tomorrow when emotions are less high." His English was halting but clear. Maxwell nodded stiffly, professional enough to recognize when a strategic retreat was necessary. "I believe that would be wise, Mr. Zhao. My team needs to review our translation protocols." He shot a venomous glance at Jackson. And personnel. As the Chinese delegation gathered their documents, Wei Jiao approached me directly. "Miss Blackwell," he said in Mandarin, deliberately using my actual name rather than my pretend married one, "you have prevented a great injustice today. Both our companies would have suffered from this deception. I wonder why a woman of your talents is not practicing law." The question struck like a physical blow. I maintain my composure with effort. "Life takes unexpected turns, Mr. Zhao. Not all paths continue as we expect." He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded as if coming to a decision. "Perhaps some paths circle back to where they should have been all along." With that cryptic statement, he bowed slightly and joined his departing colleagues. Security personnel appeared at the doorway, Maxwell's doing no doubt, and escorted Jackson from the room. The translator went without resistance. His shoulders slumped in defeat. Then it was just Maxwell and me in the vast conference room, the remnants of coffee and untouched pastries scattered across the table like debris after a storm. "You're not a cleaning lady," Maxwell said finally, his voice flat with shock. "Or rather, you are, but you're also something else entirely." I sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. The rush of adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation was fading, leaving me hollow. "I'm exactly who I said I was, Mr. Sterling. Melissa Blackwell, member of your maintenance staff for the past 6 months. And before that, a corporate attorney, fluent in Mandarin." He sat across from me, leaning forward intently. "Why would someone with your qualifications be cleaning offices?" The question was so direct, so unprecedented in my carefully constructed new life, that I found myself answering honestly. "My mother died." The words hung in the air between us, stark and painful. She was everything to me. My father had left when I was young, and she sacrificed everything to put me through school. Law school was her dream for me. Maxwell remained silent, waiting for me to continue. When she was diagnosed with cancer, I was on track for partnership, working 80-hour weeks, handling major international clients. I twisted the borrowed diamond necklace between my fingers. I took a leave of absence to care for her during her final months. After she died, I couldn't go back. "Depression?" Maxwell asked quietly. I nodded. The grief was paralyzing. The firm held my position for 6 months, but eventually they needed someone who could function. I couldn't blame them. I took a deep breath. By the time I started to emerge from the worst of it, almost 2 years had passed. My savings were depleted. My contacts had moved on. The legal world moves quickly. A 2-year gap might as well be 20. "So you took a cleaning job." "I took several jobs," I corrected him. "Waitressing, retail, eventually cleaning, because the night shifts meant I didn't have to interact with many people. It was quieter, simpler." Maxwell stood abruptly and walked to the window, gazing out at the city lights. "You saved my company tonight," he said, his back to me. If that contract had been signed as Jackson intended, Sterling Enterprises would have been gutted. Years of research and development handed over for practically nothing. He turned to face me. "Why did you speak up? You could have remained silent, collected your $1,000, and gone home." I considered the question carefully. 3,000 employees, I said finally. "That's what you told me was at stake. I couldn't be responsible for that, not when I had the power to prevent it." A slight smile touched his lips. Integrity, a rare commodity. He approached the table again. "Our legal department clearly needs restructuring, given tonight's events. Garrett Montgomery, our current counsel, is clearly not providing adequate oversight if this could happen under his watch." I said nothing, uncertain where this was heading. "I'd like to offer you a job, Ms. Blackwell. Not as my pretend wife," he added with a wry twist to his mouth, "but as an attorney. We can start you in the legal department and see where your talents take you." The offer hung in the air between us, unexpected, tempting, and terrifying. For a moment, I could almost see my mother's face, beaming with pride at the thought of me returning to law, but the memory brought with it a wave of familiar pain. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Sterling, but I don't think I can accept." I stood, smoothing the borrowed dress. It's been a long time since I practiced law. I'm not the same person I was then. Maxwell's expression hardened slightly. "That's a waste of exceptional talent, Ms. Blackwell. Not many people could have done what you did tonight." "Perhaps," I conceded, "but it's my choice to make." He nodded reluctantly. "At least let me properly compensate you for tonight." What you did was worth far more than our original agreement. The $1,000 will be fine, I said, suddenly eager to end this conversation and return to the anonymity of my regular life. If you'll excuse me, I should change back into my uniform. As I turned to leave, Maxwell called after me. The offer remains open, Ms. Blackwell. Should you change your mind? I didn't respond as I walked away, my borrowed heels clicking on the polished floor, the sound of a woman I no longer was. Valencia was waiting in the executive bathroom, her expression a mix of curiosity and concern. What happened in there? Security just escorted Jackson Liu from the building. There was a problem with the translations, I said simply, reaching behind my neck to unfasten the diamond necklace. Mr. Liu wasn't being entirely truthful. Valencia's eyebrows shot up. And you knew this how, exactly? I sighed, too tired for pretense. I speak Mandarin. I caught the discrepancies. She stared at me for a long moment, then slowly shook her head. 6 months you've been cleaning these offices, and not once did you mention you were bilingual. What else don't we know about you, Melissa Blackwell? Nothing that matters anymore, I said quietly, stepping behind a privacy screen to change out of the elegant dress and back into my gray maintenance uniform. As the fabric of my old life slipped away, I felt both relief and an unexpected pang of loss. When I emerged, Valencia was still there, studying me with new eyes. Mr. Sterling offered you a position, didn't he? I nodded, and you turned it down. It wasn't a question. How did you know? She smiled slightly. Because you're changing back into that uniform instead of celebrating your dramatic career change. She handed me an envelope. Your payment, as agreed. Although if you ask me, it's insulting given what you apparently did in there. I accepted the envelope without opening it. Thank you for your help tonight, Valencia. As I gathered my cleaning supplies to finish my interrupted shift, Valencia lingered in the doorway. Sometimes, she said carefully, the hardest part of healing isn't the pain itself, but the fear of moving forward, of building something new that might also be lost. I looked up, surprised by her insight. My mother died too, she said simply. Cancer. 4 years ago. I understand grief, Melissa, but I also understand that staying frozen in place doesn't honor their memory. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving me alone with thoughts I'd been avoiding for too long. The following morning, I arrived for my shift as usual. The office was buzzing with rumors about the previous night's drama, the translator's dismissal, the nearly disastrous deal, the mysterious woman who had saved the day. No one connected these events to the quiet cleaning lady working her way methodically through the executive floor. I was emptying Maxwell Sterling's trash bin when he entered his office, stopping short when he saw me. Ms. Blackwell, he said, clearly surprised. You're still here. I'm scheduled until 9, I replied, continuing with my task. He watched me work for a moment. The Zhao delegation has requested a meeting with our legal team this afternoon to redraft the contract. With a different translator, obviously. I nodded politely, as if this information was of passing interest rather than directly related to my actions the previous evening. They specifically asked if you would be present, Maxwell continued. Apparently, Wei Zhao was quite impressed with your legal acumen and language skills. My hand stilled on the trash bin. I told you yesterday, Mr. Sterling. I'm not interested in returning to law. So you did, he agreed, moving to his desk and opening a folder, which is why I found this particularly interesting. He withdrew a newspaper clipping and held it out to me. Reluctantly, I took it. It was an article from 8 years earlier, a profile of rising stars in corporate law. There I was, younger and sharply dressed, standing confidently before the New York skyline. The headline read, "The Future Face of International Law, Melissa Blackwell Bridges East and West." Where did you get this? I asked, my voice barely audible. Valencia is remarkably resourceful when given a task, Maxwell said. She found several articles about you. Your work on the Chen-Davidson merger was apparently groundbreaking. 3 languages, top of your class, on track to become one of the youngest partners at Thornton & Associates. He leaned against his desk. That woman in the article, she didn't disappear because your mother died, Ms. Blackwell. She's still there. I saw her last night. I stared at my younger self, so confident and full of purpose. That woman doesn't exist anymore, doesn't she? Maxwell challenged gently. Because from where I stand, she saved my company from disaster. She stood up against deception when she could have remained silent. She showed more integrity and courage than most people would in her position. He took back the article. Your mother must have been very proud of you. The mention of my mother sent a familiar ache through my chest. She was, I whispered. Would she want you cleaning offices when you could be changing lives with your actual talents? It was a low blow. And judging by Maxwell's expression, he knew it. But the question landed squarely in my heart, impossible to ignore. The meeting is at 2 o'clock, Maxwell said, turning back to his desk. Conference room A. No pressure, Ms. Blackwell. It's entirely your choice. I finished my shift in a fog of conflicting emotions. Memories of my mother surfacing with painful clarity. Her joy when I'd been accepted to law school. Her unwavering support during my grueling study sessions. Her pride when I'd landed my first position at Thornton & Associates. You'll change the world someday, Melissa, she'd told me once. I just know it. Instead, I was changing trash bags and wiping down countertops. As my shift ended, I found myself walking past conference room A. Through the glass, I could see preparations underway for the afternoon meeting. Fresh notepads, water pitchers, the trappings of corporate negotiation. The sight brought an unexpected surge of familiarity, like the scent of a childhood home. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to really consider what returning to law might mean. Not just the prestige or the salary, but the work itself, the intellectual challenge, the satisfaction of crafting agreements that served both parties, the feeling of using my mind to its full capacity. And I realized, with a clarity that was almost painful, how much I had missed it. I stood outside my apartment building at 1:30, dressed in clothes I hadn't worn in years. The charcoal gray suit had been pushed to the back of my closet, a relic of my former life that I hadn't been able to bring myself to donate. It felt strange against my skin, both foreign and achingly familiar, like running into an old friend who had once been as close as family. I hadn't committed to anything yet, I reminded myself. I was just going to observe the meeting, perhaps offer language assistance if needed. Nothing more. The taxi ride to Sterling Enterprises passed in a blur of second thoughts and memory flashes. Images of my mother kept surfacing. Her gentle encouragement when I doubted myself during law school. Her fierce pride when I'd won my first major case. I could almost hear her voice. Hiding your light doesn't honor my memory, Melissa. It buries both of us. When I arrived at the building, Valencia was waiting in the lobby. Her eyes widened slightly at my transformation, but she recovered quickly. Mr. Sterling hoped you'd come, she said, handing me a visitor's badge. The Zhao delegation has already arrived. My heart hammered as we rode the elevator to the executive floor. What was I doing? I wasn't prepared for this. It had been years since I'd reviewed a complex international contract. What if I'd forgotten crucial details? What if my Mandarin was rustier than I realized? Valencia seemed to sense my anxiety. Just breathe, she advised quietly. You stopped a corporate sabotage attempt yesterday with no preparation whatsoever. Today should be a walk in the park by comparison. Her words didn't entirely calm my nerves, but they reminded me that I had already taken the hardest step. Everything else was just following through. Conference room A was already filled with people when we entered. Maxwell Sterling stood at the head of the table, engaged in conversation with Wei Zhao. A woman I didn't recognize sat nearby, presumably the new translator. Several members of Sterling's legal department were huddled at one end of the table, including a thin, nervous-looking man I assumed was Garrett Montgomery, the current legal counsel. Maxwell looked up as I entered, and a smile spread across his face. Ah, Ms. Blackwell. Excellent timing. We were just about to begin. He gestured to an empty seat near his position at the head of the table. Please join us. The legal team exchanged confused glances. Garrett Montgomery's expression was particularly bewildered as he leaned toward a colleague and whispered something. I caught the words cleaning lady and some kind of joke. Wei Zhao, however, nodded to me with genuine respect. Miss Blackwell, he said in Mandarin, I am pleased you have joined us today. I responded in kind, bowing slightly. Thank you for requesting my presence, Mr. Zhao. I hope I can be of assistance. Maxwell called the meeting to order, explaining briefly that I would be serving as a special consultant for the negotiations. He carefully avoided mentioning my current position with the company, for which I was grateful. Now, he continued, after yesterday's unfortunate translation issues, we need to revisit several key sections of the agreement. Mr. Montgomery has prepared a revised draft that addresses the concerns raised by Ms. Blackwell. Garrett Montgomery stepped forward, his thin frame tense with barely concealed annoyance. He clearly resented my presence and the implication that his work needed correction. The revised draft maintains all originally agreed-upon terms while clarifying language regarding intellectual property rights, exclusivity provisions, and revenue-sharing models, he explained, distributing copies around the table. I accepted my copy and began reviewing it immediately, my old training kicking in automatically. The document was complex, with multiple appendices and cross-references, standard for international business agreements of this magnitude. As I read, I made mental notes of potential issues and ambiguities that might cause problems later. The official translator began working through the document with Wei Zhao and his team, section by section. I listened carefully to her Mandarin, which was technically accurate, but occasionally missed subtle legal nuances. When she struggled with a particularly complex clause about technology licensing restrictions, Wei Zhao glanced in my direction. Perhaps, he suggested in Mandarin, Ms. Blackwell could offer her interpretation of this section. All eyes turned to me. This was the moment. Step back into the shadows or step forward into the light. I took a deep breath and nodded. The issue with this clause, I began, addressing both sides of the table, is that it doesn't adequately define what constitutes derivative technology. Without that specificity, Zhao Industries could potentially be restricted from developing their own innovations that build upon shared research. I suggested alternative language that would protect Sterling's core intellectual property, while giving Zhao Industries the freedom to develop their own advancements. As I spoke, I felt something long dormant awakening within me, the precision of legal analysis, the satisfaction of solving complex problems, the flow of moving between languages to bridge understanding. Maxwell was watching me with undisguised approval. Even Garrett Montgomery had stopped glaring and was taking notes on my suggestions. For the next 2 hours, I found myself increasingly central to the negotiations. When disagreements arose, both sides looked to me for clarification or compromise solutions. My mind felt sharper than it had in years, engaged in work that challenged and fulfilled me. It was like finding a part of myself I had believed was gone forever. During a brief break, Maxwell pulled me aside. "You're a natural at this," he said quietly. "Better than anyone on our current legal team, if I'm being honest. Garrett looks like he's going to have an aneurysm every time you speak, but even he can't deny your skill." I smiled, surprised by how good the compliment felt. "Thank you. It's coming back more easily than I expected. That's because it's who you are, Melissa." His eyes held mine with unexpected warmth. "Some people work at being attorneys. For others, it's woven into their DNA. You're clearly the latter." Before I could respond, Wei Zhao approached us. "Mr. Sterling, might I have a moment with Ms. Blackwell?" Maxwell nodded and stepped away, leaving me alone with the Chinese businessman. "You have a remarkable mind," Wei Zhao said in Mandarin, his voice low and contemplative. "Sharp, balanced, honorable. These qualities are rare in international business." "Thank you," I replied, uncertain where this was heading. "May I ask a personal question?" When I nodded, he continued, "Why were you cleaning offices when you possess such extraordinary talents?" It was the same question Maxwell had asked, but somehow different coming from Wei Zhao. There was no judgment in his tone, only genuine curiosity. "I lost someone very dear to me," I said simply. "My mother. The grief changed me, made it impossible to continue my previous path." Wei Zhao nodded slowly. "In my culture, we believe that great suffering can either destroy a person or transform them into something stronger, like the sword that must pass through fire to become steel." He studied my face. "You have passed through the fire, Ms. Blackwell. The question now is what kind of blade you will become." His words resonated in a way I hadn't expected. I had survived the worst pain imaginable, the loss of the person who had been my foundation, my champion, my home. But surviving wasn't the same as living. For years I had been existing in a half state, neither fully present nor truly absent. "Whatever you decide," Wei Zhao continued, "know that you have earned my respect. My company would be fortunate to work with someone of your caliber." Was he offering me a job? Before I could ask for clarification, Maxwell called the meeting back to order, and the moment passed. The remainder of the negotiations proceeded smoothly. By 5 o'clock, we had a revised agreement that satisfied both parties, one that protected Sterling Enterprises' intellectual property while giving Zhao Industries the partnership benefits they sought. The atmosphere in the room was positive, even celebratory, as Maxwell and Wei Jiao shook hands on the preliminary agreement. "The formal signing will take place tomorrow morning," Maxwell announced. 9 o'clock sharp. "Ms. Blackwell, I trust you'll join us." All eyes turned to me expectantly. This was no longer about observing or offering occasional assistance. This was Maxwell publicly signaling my involvement in the deal, and, implicitly, my potential future with the company. "I'll be here," I heard myself say, the words surprising me even as they left my mouth. As the meeting dispersed, Garrett Montgomery approached me, his earlier hostility replaced by reluctant professional courtesy. "Your input was helpful today," he admitted stiffly. "Where did you practice before?" "Thornton and Associates," I replied. "International Corporate Division." Recognition flickered in his eyes. "Thornton has an impressive reputation. If you're interested in returning to law, I'm sure they'd consider—" "Ms. Blackwell will not be returning to Thornton," Maxwell interrupted, appearing suddenly at my side. "If she decides to practice law again, it will be with Sterling Enterprises." He smiled thinly at Montgomery. "Unless you're eager to surrender your position, Garrett?" Montgomery blanched. "No, sir. Of course not. I was merely making polite conversation." "Yes, I understand." Maxwell dismissed him with a nod, then turned to me. "Walk with me to my office?" As we left the conference room, I felt a strange mixture of exhilaration and apprehension. The day had unfolded in ways I couldn't have anticipated that morning. I had stepped back into a world I'd thought was closed to me forever, and it had welcomed me as if I'd never left. "You were extraordinary today," Maxwell said as we entered his office. "Even better than I'd hoped." "It felt good," I admitted, using my mind that way again, making a difference. He gestured for me to sit, then took the chair beside me rather than retreating behind his imposing desk. It was a subtle shift in dynamic, colleagues rather than employer and employee. "I'm going to be direct, Melissa," he said, leaning forward. "I want you on my legal team, not as a consultant or a temporary advisor, but in a permanent capacity, senior counsel to start, with potential for advancement based on performance." The offer was generous, more than generous for someone who had been out of the field for years. "What about Garrett Montgomery?" I asked. "He's your current counsel." Maxwell waved a dismissive hand. "Garrett is competent but uninspired. He follows rules. He doesn't shape them. And after yesterday's fiasco with Jackson Liu, it's clear his oversight has been lacking." He fixed me with an intent gaze. "You, on the other hand, have proven yourself to be exceptional. The kind of attorney who can anticipate problems before they arise and create solutions that benefit all parties." My mind raced with possibilities. A return to law, a salary that would lift me from my precarious financial situation, work that engaged my intellect and skills. It was everything I had once wanted, everything my mother had wanted for me. And yet, the thought still filled me with a nebulous dread. "I don't know if I'm ready," I said honestly. "It's been a long time." "Today proved you're more than ready," Maxwell countered. "But I understand your hesitation. Grief changes us, makes us afraid to build new attachments, new purposes." His expression softened. "I lost my father when I was in college. For years afterward, I was afraid to truly succeed, because every achievement was a reminder that he wasn't there to see it." I nodded, surprised by his insight and vulnerability. "What helped me," he continued, "was realizing that living fully was the greatest tribute I could offer to his memory. That shrinking from life didn't honor his sacrifices. It wasted them." His words struck a chord that resonated painfully in my chest. Wasn't that exactly what I had been doing? Wasting my mother's sacrifices by hiding from my own potential? "I'm not asking for an answer right now," Maxwell said, rising from his chair. "Take the evening to think about it. The position will be available whenever you're ready." As I stood to leave, a thought occurred to me. "Why are you doing this? You barely know me." Maxwell considered the question thoughtfully. "Part of it is self-interest," he admitted. "You're brilliant, and you saved my company from disaster. Having you on my team is good business." He paused. "But it's also because I recognize something in you. A spark that's been dampened but not extinguished. I'd like to see what happens when it's given oxygen again." I left Sterling Enterprises in a daze, my mind whirling with conflicting emotions. The familiar weight of grief still pressed against my chest, but alongside it was something I hadn't felt in years. Possibility. My apartment felt smaller and shabbier than usual when I returned home that evening. I I hadn't really noticed its limitations before. The water stain on the ceiling, the temperamental heater, the view of the brick wall of the adjacent building. It had been a place to sleep. Nothing more. I hadn't wanted or needed it to be a home. But now, surrounded by these drab walls, I found myself longing for something more. Not luxury, necessarily, but purpose, meaning. A life that honored my capabilities rather than buried them. I opened my closet and pushed aside the cleaning uniforms to reveal the few remaining artifacts of my previous life. Tailored suits, professional dresses, a pair of leather pumps I'd once worn to court. I ran my fingers over the fabrics, remembering the woman who had worn them with such confidence. At the back of the closet, in a box I rarely opened, was a small framed photograph. My mother and me at my law school graduation. Her face beamed with pride as she stood beside me in my cap and gown. It had been the happiest day of her life, she'd told me, seeing me achieve what she had never had the opportunity to pursue herself. "What would you tell me to do, Mom?" I whispered to the photograph, tears blurring my vision. I'm so afraid of feeling everything again, of caring about something enough to risk losing it. No answer came, of course, just the silence of my empty apartment and the echo of my own thoughts. I placed the photograph on my nightstand instead of returning it to the box. It was time to stop hiding from her memory, and from my own. The next morning, I arrived at Sterling Enterprises 30 minutes before the scheduled contract signing. I had made my decision during the long, sleepless night, turning possibilities over in my mind, until one path emerged as the only one I could truly live with. Valencia spotted me in the lobby and did a double take at my appearance. I was wearing my best suit, a navy blue ensemble that had once been my courtroom armor. My hair was styled professionally, and I carried a leather portfolio I had unearthed from storage. "Well," she said with a smile, "I guess this answers the question of whether you're coming back." "Not quite," I replied. "I need to speak with Mr. Sterling before I make any final decisions." She nodded knowingly. "He's in his office. The signing isn't for another 20 minutes. Maxwell looked up from his desk as I entered, his expression brightening when he saw my professional attire. "Ms. Blackwell, you've made a decision." "Almost," I said, taking the seat across from him. "But I need to clarify something first." He sat back, giving me his full attention. "I'm listening." "If I accept this position," I began carefully, "I need to know that it's because of my abilities, not because you feel sorry for me, or because you feel you owe me for yesterday." Maxwell's eyebrows rose slightly. "I don't make hiring decisions based on sympathy, Ms. Blackwell. And while I am grateful for your intervention with the Zhao contract, that simply brought your talents to my attention. It's those talents I'm interested in acquiring for Sterling Enterprises." I nodded, satisfied with his answer. "Then I have conditions." "I expected as much," he said, the hint of a smile playing at his lips. "Name them." "First, I want flexibility as I transition back into legal practice. I've been away for a long time, and I'll need time to update my knowledge and rebuild my confidence." Maxwell nodded. "Reasonable. What else?" "Second, I want to establish a pro bono program within Sterling's legal department. 3 hours per week of my time, and any other attorneys who wish to participate, dedicated to helping people who can't afford legal representation." His expression registered surprise, but he didn't object. "That's unusual for a corporate legal team, but not impossible. I assume you have a specific focus in mind?" "Families dealing with terminal illness," I said quietly. "People who need help navigating medical leave laws, insurance disputes, estate planning, the practical aspects of facing death that no one prepares you for." Understanding dawned in Maxwell's eyes. "For your mother," he said softly. I nodded. "If I'm going to return to law, it needs to be meaningful. Not just corporate profits, but actual human impact." "Done," Maxwell said without hesitation. "Anything else?" I took a deep breath. "Last condition. I don't want special treatment. No shortcuts to advancement. No favoritism. I want to earn my place here based on merit alone." Maxwell studied me for a long moment, then extended his hand across the desk. "Those terms are acceptable, Ms. Blackwell. Welcome to Sterling Enterprises' legal department." As we shook hands, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Not the weight of grief, which would always be part of me, but the burden of hiding from my own potential. For the first time in years, I was stepping fully into the light. The contract signing ceremony went smoothly. Wei Zhao seemed pleased to see me in my new capacity, nodding approvingly when Maxwell introduced me as Sterling Enterprises' newest senior counsel. After the documents were signed and photographs taken, Wei Zhao approached me. "So," he said in Mandarin, "you have chosen to become steel after all." I smiled, understanding his reference to our earlier conversation. "I'm trying," I replied. "It's not easy to reshape oneself. The most valuable things never are," he said wisely. "I look forward to working with you, Miss Blackwell. Perhaps next time, you will be the one drafting our agreements rather than merely saving them." As the Chinese delegation departed, Garrett Montgomery approached me, his expression a careful neutral. "Mr. Sterling informed me of your appointment," he said stiffly. "I suppose we'll be working together." "It seems that way," I agreed, extending my hand. "I hope we can collaborate effectively." He hesitated only briefly before shaking it. "Sterling Enterprises has high standards. I trust you'll meet them." "I intend to exceed them," I replied calmly. A flash of competitive spirit sparked in his eyes. "We'll see." With a curt nod, he walked away. Valencia appeared at my side, watching Montgomery's retreat with amusement. "He's terrified you're after his job," she remarked. "Maybe I am," I said with a small smile. "Eventually," she laughed. "I knew there was more to you than met the eye, Melissa Blackwell. From cleaning offices to senior counsel in 48 hours. That might be a company record." "It's been a surreal few days," I admitted. "Well, I hope you're ready for more," Valencia said, glancing at her tablet. "Maxwell wants you in the executive planning meeting this afternoon. Something about reassessing our approach to international partnerships in light of the Zhao agreement." She looked up at me with genuine warmth. "Your office is being prepared as we speak. 13th floor, corner suite, with a view. An office. My office." The concept felt foreign after so long away from the corporate world. "Thank you, Valencia, for everything," she nodded, understanding the deeper gratitude behind my words. Sometimes we all need a little push to become who we're meant to be. As she walked away, I found myself alone in the conference room where everything had changed. Through the windows, I could see the city sprawling before me, full of possibilities, challenges, new beginnings. For so long, I had been surviving, moving through life like a ghost. Now I was on the verge of living again. It wouldn't be easy. The grief wouldn't disappear, and the fear of loss would always lurk in the background. But maybe that was the point. Life wasn't about avoiding pain or hiding from potential hurt. It was about embracing the full spectrum of experience, the joy and the sorrow, the victories and the defeats. My mother had given me the foundation to build something meaningful. Now it was time to honor her sacrifice by using the gifts she had helped me develop. Not just surviving, but thriving. Not just existing, but making a difference. I picked up my portfolio and walked toward the door, ready to begin the next chapter of my life. The cleaning lady was gone. The attorney had returned. And somewhere in between those identities was the woman I was meant to become. 6 months passed in a whirlwind of contracts, negotiations, and late nights at the office. My transition back into legal practice had been challenging but exhilarating, like rediscovering a language I had once been fluent in. Each day brought new tests of my abilities, and I found myself rising to meet them with growing confidence. My corner office on the 13th floor had slowly transformed from an impersonal corporate space into something that reflected my return to professional life. Law books lined the shelves, sticky notes adorned my computer monitor, and a small potted plant, a housewarming gift from Valencia, added a touch of life to the sleek modern decor. But the most important item sat on my desk, the photograph of my mother and me at my law school graduation, now displayed prominently rather than hidden away. I was reviewing the final draft of a licensing agreement when Maxwell knocked on my open door. "Got a minute?" he asked, looking uncharacteristically hesitant. "Of course," I replied, setting aside the document. Over the past months, Maxwell and I had developed a productive professional relationship. He respected my legal expertise, and I appreciated his business acumen. If there was occasional tension between us, moments when our eyes held contact a beat too long, or when our fingers brushed as we exchanged documents, we both carefully ignored it. Maxwell closed the door behind him and took a seat across from my desk. "I have a proposition for you," he began. "The board met yesterday to discuss corporate restructuring." My stomach tightened. In the business world, restructuring often preceded layoffs. Had I misread my standing in the company? "I see," I said cautiously. "And how does this affect the legal department?" "Directly," Maxwell replied. "Garrett Montgomery has accepted a position with Robinson and Miller in Chicago. He's leaving at the end of the month." I blinked in surprise. Garrett and I had maintained a coolly professional relationship since my arrival, with him gradually coming to respect my legal abilities, if not my unconventional path to the position. I hadn't heard he was looking to leave. He wasn't, until they made him an offer he couldn't refuse. Maxwell leaned forward slightly. Which brings me to my proposition. I want you to take over as Chief Legal Officer. The words hung in the air between us. Chief Legal Officer, the top legal position in the company, reporting directly to the CEO and the board. It was the kind of role that attorneys worked decades to achieve, and here it was, being offered to me after just 6 months. That's a significant promotion, I said carefully. There are several senior attorneys with more experience and longer tenure with Sterling Enterprises, none of whom saved the company from a catastrophic contract disaster, Maxwell pointed out. None of whom established our first pro bono program, which, by the way, has generated more positive press than any charitable initiative we've undertaken in years, and none of whom consistently impress Wei Zhao, who has personally mentioned your exceptional mind in 3 separate communications. I felt a flush of pride at the praise, but caution tempered my response. The board approved this? Over internal candidates with more seniority? The board trusts my judgment, Maxwell said with a slight smile. And the numbers don't lie. Since you joined the legal team, we've reduced contract approval time by 23% while improving our liability protection. The Zhao partnership is exceeding projections by 15%, largely due to the clarity of the agreement you helped craft. He spread his hands. Results speak for themselves. They did, and I couldn't deny feeling a surge of satisfaction at having my contributions recognized so concretely. Still, something about the offer nagged at me. What about my third condition? I asked. No special treatment, no shortcuts. I wanted to earn my advancement. Maxwell's expression softened. Melissa, you have earned this. Every day for the past 6 months, you've proven yourself not just capable but exceptional. This isn't favoritism. It's recognizing talent and rewarding performance. He hesitated, then added, Your mother would be proud of what you've accomplished. The mention of my mother sent a familiar pang through my chest, but it wasn't the sharp pain of before. Time and purpose had gradually transformed my grief into something I could carry without being crushed by it. She would, I agreed softly. She always believed I could do more than I thought possible. So do I, Maxwell said, his voice low and sincere. Our eyes met, and for a moment, the professional veneer between us thinned, revealing something more personal underneath. The position is yours if you want it. Take the weekend to think about it. After he left, I turned to the window, gazing out at the city skyline as I contemplated the offer. Chief Legal Officer of Sterling Enterprises at 34. It was beyond anything I could have imagined when I was pushing my cleaning cart through these same hallways just 6 months ago. My phone buzzed with a calendar notification. Pro Bono Clinic, 3 p.m. I smiled at the reminder. The clinic had become the highlight of my week. A chance to use my legal skills to help people navigating the same devastating terrain I had once traversed alone. The community center where we held the clinic was a modest building in a working-class neighborhood, worlds away from the gleaming corporate tower of Sterling Enterprises. I signed in at the front desk, where Sophia, the center's coordinator, greeted me warmly. Your 3 o'clock is already here, she said, handing me a file. Single mother, 2 kids. Her husband died 3 months ago. Pancreatic cancer. Insurance is denying claims from his final treatments, saying they weren't medically necessary. I felt a familiar tightening in my throat. Put her in consultation room 2. I'll be right there. The woman who waited for me was perhaps 40, with dark circles under her eyes and hands that couldn't seem to stay still. She introduced herself as Diana Reynolds. Thank you for seeing me, she said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion evident in every line of her body. The hospital is threatening to send my account to collections, and I don't know what to do anymore. As she shared her story, I was struck by the parallels to my own experience. The devastating diagnosis, the frantic search for treatments, the mounting bills that arrived with cold precision, even as her world collapsed. But unlike me, Diana had 2 children depending on her, and no professional skills to fall back on once the crisis passed. The insurance company is wrong, I told her after reviewing the medical records and policy documents. These treatments were standard protocol for stage 4 pancreatic cancer. They were attempting to extend your husband's life, which absolutely qualifies as medically necessary. I made notes as I spoke. I'm going to draft an appeal letter today. If they deny it again, we'll escalate to the state insurance commissioner. Relief flooded Diana's face. You really think we can win? I know we can, I said firmly. Insurance companies count on people being too overwhelmed to fight back. But you're not fighting alone anymore. By the time our session ended, Diana had something she'd been missing: hope. As I walked her out, she impulsively reached for my hand. My husband would have handled all this, she said quietly. He was the strong one. I never thought I could do any of this without him. You're stronger than you realize, I told her, remembering my own journey. And it gets easier. Not perfect, but easier. After Diana left, I lingered at the community center, finishing the appeal letter while the details were fresh in my mind. I was so absorbed in the work that I didn't notice someone approaching until a shadow fell across my desk. Working late on a Friday? Some things never change. I looked up, startled by the familiar voice. Jackson Liu stood before me, his expression uncertain, his once immaculate appearance now notably more modest. He wore no designer suit, no expensive watch, just simple business casual attire that suggested a significant step down from his former status. Jackson, I said, my voice cooling instantly. What are you doing here? He gestured to the chair across from me. May I? Against my better judgment, I nodded. Curiosity outweighed my lingering anger toward the man who had nearly sabotaged Sterling Enterprises, and who had apparently recognized me that night but said nothing about our shared past. I heard you were volunteering here, he said, settling into the chair. Word gets around in legal circles. Former cleaning lady becomes senior counsel at Sterling makes for interesting gossip. I'm not here to gossip, I said curtly. I'm working. Jackson nodded, glancing at the paper spread before me. Pro bono insurance appeal? That's not what I would have expected from the Melissa Blackwell I knew in law school. People change, I replied. Sometimes for the better, sometimes not. The implication hung between us. He accepted the barb with a slight wince. I deserved that. Jackson ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I remembered from our law school days. What happened that night at Sterling, I can explain. You can explain deliberately mistranslating a major international contract? Attempting to sabotage both companies? I kept my voice low, but there was no disguising the edge in it. I'm curious what possible explanation could justify that. Jackson leaned forward, his eyes meeting mine directly. I was being blackmailed, he said simply. Whatever I had expected, it wasn't this. Blackmailed? By whom? A third company, Ryutech Industries. They wanted access to Sterling's proprietary technology without the merger constraints. They had information about me, personal information that would have destroyed my career and my marriage. I studied his face, searching for signs of deception, but finding only weary resignation. Why are you telling me this now? Because I owe you the truth, he said. After that night, I lost everything anyway. My job, my reputation, eventually my marriage. The blackmailers released the information when I failed to deliver what they wanted. He gave a bitter laugh. Turns out the thing I was most afraid of facing wasn't nearly as bad as I'd imagined. My ex-wife might have forgiven an affair. She couldn't forgive betraying my professional ethics. Why didn't you go to the authorities? Report the blackmail? Fear, he said simply. Then shame. Now it's too late. No evidence, just my word against theirs. He shrugged. I'm not here for sympathy, Melissa. I made my choices. But when I heard about what you're doing here, helping people who've lost loved ones to illness, it reminded me of the person you always were. Even in law school, you cared about more than just winning. I wasn't sure how to respond. The Jackson I'd known had been brilliant but ambitious, focused solely on prestige and success. This humbled version was almost unrecognizable. What are you doing now? I asked finally. Teaching paralegal courses at the community college, he replied. It's not the career I planned, but it's honest work, and maybe I can help others avoid my mistakes. He hesitated, then added, I'm also volunteering. Legal aid clinic on the south side, twice a month. A silence fell between us. Not comfortable, but no longer hostile. We had both been transformed by our experiences, pushed onto paths we never would have chosen voluntarily. Second chances are rare, Melissa, Jackson said softly. You got one. You went from cleaning offices to the executive floor in 6 months. That's remarkable. It wasn't luck, I said, more sharply than I intended. It was hard work and integrity. I know, he acknowledged. And you deserve every bit of success. I just hope." He trailed off, then stood abruptly. "I should go. I just wanted to explain and to say I'm sorry, for what it's worth." As he turned to leave, I called after him. "Jackson." He paused, looking back. "The Southside Clinic. Do they need more volunteers?" A small smile touched his lips. "Always. I can send you the information." "Do that," I said, surprising myself with the offer. "I'm not promising anything, but I'll consider it." After he left, I sat for a long time, thinking about second chances and redemption. Jackson had made a terrible mistake and lost everything. I had hidden from life and nearly lost myself. Both of us were trying to rebuild, to find meaning in the aftermath of our private disasters. The following Monday morning, I arrived at Sterling Enterprises earlier than usual. The weekend had given me time to reflect on Maxwell's offer and what I truly wanted for my future. As I rode the elevator to the executive floor, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't experienced in years. Maxwell was already in his office, reviewing reports with his characteristic intensity. He looked up as I knocked on his open door, his expression brightening. "Melissa, come in." I took the seat across from him, smoothing my skirt with suddenly nervous hands. "I've made my decision about the chief legal officer position," I began. "And?" Maxwell set aside his reports, giving me his full attention. "I'm accepting," I said firmly, "but I have a few additional conditions." A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Of course you do. Let's hear them." "First, I want to expand the pro bono program. Not just more hours, but more attorneys participating. It's good for the community and good for the company's reputation." Maxwell nodded. "Reasonable. Next?" "Second, I want to implement an ethics training program for all departments involved in international business. What happened with Jackson Liu and the Zhao contract wasn't just a translation issue. It was a failure of oversight and ethical guidelines. Also reasonable, though the board may have questions about the cost," Maxwell said thoughtfully. "And your third condition?" I took a deep breath. "This is more personal. I've been living like a ghost for years, Maxwell. Even since joining Sterling, I've been focused entirely on work. I need more balance." I met his eyes directly, "including the freedom to explore whatever this is between us, if you're interested." Maxwell's expression shifted from professional attentiveness to something warmer, more vulnerable. "I've been interested since the night you stood up and spoke Mandarin in that conference room," he admitted quietly. "But I didn't want to complicate your transition back into professional life, or make you feel pressured, given our positions." "I appreciate that," I said. "And I'm not suggesting we announce anything to the company, but I'd like the chance to get to know you outside these walls. As people, not just CEO and legal counsel." Maxwell reached across the desk, his hand covering mine. "Dinner tonight?" he suggested, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "I know a place where no one from Sterling will see us." I turned my hand to lace my fingers with his, feeling a flutter of anticipation that had nothing to do with contracts or career advancement. "I'd like that." Our moment was interrupted by Valencia, who appeared at the door with her customary efficiency. "Sorry to interrupt, but the Zhao delegation has arrived for their quarterly review. They're asking specifically for both of you." Maxwell and I exchanged a look of mutual understanding as we disentangled our hands. "Work now, exploration later." "We'll be right there," Maxwell told Valencia. As she departed, he turned back to me. "Ready for this, Chief Legal Officer Blackwell?" The title sent a thrill of pride through me, not just for the achievement itself, but for how far I'd come from the woman who had pushed a cleaning cart through these halls, hiding from her own potential. "More than ready," I replied, standing with renewed purpose. As we walked together toward the conference room, I thought about the twisting path that had brought me here, the devastating loss that had nearly destroyed me, the chance encounter that had forced me to confront my buried talents, the courage it had taken to step back into the light after years in the shadows. My mother had always told me that life rarely follows a straight line, that the most meaningful journeys often come from unexpected detours. In losing her, I had lost myself for a time, but perhaps that loss had been necessary for me to find a new way forward, one that honored both her memory and my own authentic self. Wei Zhao was waiting for us, his expression as inscrutably calm as ever. As we exchanged greetings, he studied me with knowing eyes. "Ms. Blackwell," he said in Mandarin, "you look well, like someone who has found her proper place in the world." I smiled, responding in kind. "Not just a place, Mr. Zhao, a purpose." He nodded approvingly. That is the greatest achievement of all. As the meeting began, I opened my portfolio and prepared to protect Sterling Enterprises' interests while fostering a genuine partnership with Zhao Industries. No deception, no hidden agendas, just honest negotiation and mutual benefit, the way business should be conducted, the way I would ensure it was conducted under my leadership. 6 months ago, I had been invisible, a shadow moving through these offices after hours, emptying trash cans while others made decisions that shaped the world. Now I sat at the table as a full participant, my voice respected, my expertise valued. The cleaning lady had saved the company once through a chance confluence of skills and opportunity. The chief legal officer would protect it every day through diligence, integrity, and hard-won wisdom. As I caught Maxwell's eye across the table, I saw not just professional respect, but personal promise, the possibility of connection beyond career ambitions. Another piece of myself that I had kept locked away, now cautiously emerging into the light. Later that evening, as Maxwell and I shared dinner at a quiet restaurant far from Sterling Enterprises, he raised his glass in a toast. "To new beginnings," he said softly. I clinked my glass against his, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the wine. "To new beginnings," I echoed, "and to my mother, who would have loved seeing me here." "Tell me about her," Maxwell said, his eyes warm with genuine interest. As I began sharing stories of the woman who had shaped me, her strength, her sacrifices, her unwavering belief in my potential, I felt her presence more strongly than I had in years, not as a painful absence, but as an enduring influence, guiding me still. The grief hadn't disappeared. It never would entirely, but it had transformed from a prison into a foundation, something I could build upon rather than something that confined me. And what I was building, day by day, was a life worthy of her sacrifices and my talents. From cleaning lady to chief legal officer in 6 months, from hiding in the shadows to stepping fully into the light, from merely surviving to truly living again. Not despite my loss, but because of what that loss had taught me about resilience, purpose, and the courage to begin again. "You know," Maxwell said thoughtfully as our evening drew to a close, "most people would have stayed hidden. It takes extraordinary courage to reinvent yourself the way you have." I considered his words, thinking of all the moments that had led me here, both the devastating losses and the unexpected opportunities. "Not reinvention," I corrected gently. "Recognition of who I've always been, beneath the grief and fear." I smiled, feeling the truth of it settle in my bones. I didn't become someone new. I remembered who I was. As we stepped into the cool evening air, Maxwell took my hand, his touch both tentative and promising. Another beginning, another chance to embrace life fully, with all its risks and rewards. The cleaning lady who spoke Mandarin, the grieving daughter who found her way back to purpose, the attorney who remembered her calling. All these were parts of me, pieces of a whole that was still emerging, still growing. And for the first time in years, I was eager to discover what came next. 1 year had passed since I'd accepted the position of chief legal officer at Sterling Enterprises. A year of challenges and triumphs, of rebuilding a life I had once thought lost forever. My office now reflected the integration of my past and present. Law degrees displayed alongside photographs that chronicled my journey. Pride of place still belonged to the picture of my mother and me at my graduation, but it had been joined by new memories. The ribbon cutting for our expanded pro bono legal clinic, the team celebration after successfully negotiating our largest international contract to date, and a candid shot of Maxwell and me laughing at the company holiday party. Our professional facade momentarily dropped to reveal the deeper connection we'd been carefully nurturing. The morning sunlight streamed through my office windows as I reviewed the final preparations for today's board meeting. It wasn't just any meeting. It was the culmination of months of work on what we'd come to call the Blackwell Initiative, a comprehensive overhaul of Sterling's international business practices with ethics and transparency at its core. Named after me, despite my protests, the initiative represented everything I believed about how business should be conducted. Today, I would present it to the board for final approval. My phone buzzed with a text from Maxwell. "Ready for your big moment?" I smiled, typing back, "As ready as I'll ever be. See you there." Our relationship had evolved gradually over the past year, moving from cautious professional admiration to something deeper and more personal. We'd been discreet at work, maintaining appropriate boundaries while allowing ourselves to explore the connection we both felt outside office hours. It wasn't always easy navigating the complexities of a relationship with power dynamics, as complicated as ours, but we'd found our way through honesty and mutual respect. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Valencia entered, impeccably dressed as always, but with an unusual tension in her posture. "Everything's set for the board meeting," she said, "but there's something you should know first." She hesitated, which was so uncharacteristic that I immediately sat up straighter. "Wei Zhao has arrived early. He's asking to speak with you privately before the meeting." This was unexpected. While Wei Zhao and I had developed a solid professional relationship over the past year, unscheduled meetings weren't his style. "Did he say what it's about?" Valencia shook her head. "Only that it's important and concerns both Sterling and your future." She gave me a meaningful look. "He's waiting in the small conference room." As I gathered my materials, a flutter of anxiety passed through me. Had something gone wrong with our partnership? Had the Blackwell initiative somehow offended Zhao Industries? I took a deep breath, centering myself the way I'd learned to do in the courtroom years ago. Whatever the issue, I would face it directly. Wei Zhao rose as I entered the conference room, bowing slightly in greeting. "Ms. Blackwell, thank you for making time before your important presentation." "Of course, Mr. Zhao," I replied in Mandarin, returning his bow. "Your presence is always welcome at Sterling Enterprises." He smiled, gesturing for me to sit. "I have come today not just as a business partner, but as someone who has watched your remarkable journey with great interest." I settled into my chair, curious but cautious. "You honor me with your attention." Wei Zhao studied me with those penetrating eyes that seemed to see beyond surface appearances. "Do you remember our conversation when you first revealed your abilities? I spoke of suffering transforming a person, like a sword passing through fire." "I remember," I said softly. "How could I forget? It had been a pivotal moment in my rebirth." He nodded, satisfied. "I have watched you forge yourself anew this past year, from cleaning floors to leading a corporate legal department, from hiding your talents to creating initiatives that will transform how international business is conducted." He reached into his briefcase and withdrew an elegant envelope, sliding it across the table to me. "This is why I have come today." I accepted the envelope with a questioning look. Inside was a formal letter on Zhao Industries' letterhead, written in both Mandarin and English. As I read, my breath caught in my throat. "A partnership?" I looked up, stunned. "You want to establish a joint international legal ethics institute?" Wei Zhao's eyes crinkled with pleasure at my surprise. "The Zhao Blackwell Institute for International Business Ethics," he confirmed. "Based in both China and America, dedicated to promoting transparent, ethical business practices across cultures. With you as its founding director." I stared at the proposal, momentarily speechless. It was ambitious in scope, proposing educational programs for law students, consulting services for international corporations, and advocacy work to improve legal standards globally. "This would be separate from my position at Sterling?" I asked, trying to wrap my mind around the implications. "That is for you to decide," Wei Zhao replied. "Mr. Sterling and I have discussed the possibility. He understands the significance of what I am proposing. Whether you maintain your role here while building the institute, or transition to focus entirely on this new venture, that choice belongs to you." My mind raced with possibilities. The institute represented everything I believed in, using law not just for corporate profit, but for positive global change. It would allow me to combine my legal expertise, language skills, and personal experience into something truly meaningful. "Why me?" I asked finally. "There are more experienced attorneys, more prominent legal scholars." "None with your unique perspective," Wei Zhao interrupted gently. "You understand both worlds, the corporate boardroom and the struggles of ordinary people. You have known great success and devastating loss. You speak the languages of East and West." He leaned forward. "Most importantly, you have proven that principles need not be sacrificed for progress. That is the message our global business community needs." Emotion tightened my throat as I thought of how far I had come. From the depths of grief that had led me to push a cleaning cart through these very offices, to this moment of extraordinary opportunity. My mother would have been amazed, and so proud. "I'm honored by your proposal," I said sincerely, "but I'll need time to consider it carefully." Wei Zhao smiled. "Of course. The institute is not a small undertaking. It would require your full heart as well as your mind. He stood, preparing to leave. The board meeting awaits. Perhaps afterward, when your initiative has been approved, we can discuss this further. His confidence in my presentation was touching. As we walked together toward the boardroom, I felt a strange sense of standing at a crossroads, one I could never have imagined even 18 months ago. The board meeting proceeded exactly as I had hoped. My presentation of the Blackwell Initiative was met with thoughtful questions and ultimately unanimous approval. Throughout, I was acutely aware of Maxwell watching me with unmistakable pride and of Wei Zhao observing with his characteristic calm assessment. As the meeting concluded and board members filtered out, Maxwell approached me, keeping his tone professional despite the warmth in his eyes. "Excellent work, Ms. Blackwell. The initiative will set new standards for the industry." "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," I replied, matching his formal tone. "I believe it will serve the company well." Once we were alone in the boardroom, his professional facade softened. "That was magnificent, Melissa. You had every person in that room convinced within the first 5 minutes." He glanced toward the door Wei Zhao had exited through. "So, are you going to tell me what he proposed? Or should I pretend I don't know?" I smiled, unsurprised that Maxwell was already aware of Wei Zhao's visit. "The Zhao Blackwell Institute," I said, still finding the name surreal. "An opportunity I never could have imagined." Maxwell nodded, his expression a complex mixture of pride and something that looked almost like resignation. "He's right, you know. No one is better qualified to lead something like this. You've always had a vision that extends beyond quarterly profits." "You don't seem surprised," I observed. "Wei Zhao approached me about the concept last month," Maxwell admitted. "He wanted my blessing before making the offer." I raised an eyebrow. "And you gave it? Even though it might mean losing your chief legal officer?" Maxwell's eyes held mine steadily. "Even though it might mean losing much more than that," he said quietly. "Some opportunities transcend personal considerations, Melissa. This could be your legacy." The implication was clear. If I accepted Wei Zhao's offer and dedicated myself to building the institute, it would likely change not just my professional life, but my personal one as well. Maxwell and I had only just begun exploring what we might become to each other. Long-distance relationships between continents were notoriously difficult to maintain. "I haven't decided anything yet," I told him. "This isn't a choice I can make impulsively." He reached for my hand, a rare display of affection within the company walls. "Take all the time you need. Whatever you decide, I'll support you." The generosity of his response touched me deeply. This was a man who had already given me so much. A second chance at my career, the space to rebuild my confidence, and the beginnings of a relationship I had never expected to find. That evening, I returned to my apartment, a new one, spacious and filled with light, so different from the dreary space where I'd spent my years of grief. As I kicked off my heels and changed into comfortable clothes, my thoughts continued to circle around Wei Zhao's proposal and what it would mean for my future. I made myself a cup of tea and carried it to the small home office I'd created, where a special shelf held mementos of my journey. Among them was my old Sterling Enterprises maintenance badge, a reminder of where I'd been and how far I'd come. Beside it sat a handwritten note from Diana Reynolds, the first client I'd helped at the pro bono clinic, thanking me for winning her insurance appeal and giving her family a chance to heal without the burden of medical debt. As I stood contemplating these artifacts of my past and present, my phone rang. The screen showed a name that brought an immediate smile. Franklin Blackwell, my father. "Dad," I answered warmly. "I was just thinking about calling you." "Great minds think alike," he chuckled. "How did the board meeting go today? Did they approve your initiative?" "Unanimously," I confirmed. But something unexpected happened. I found myself telling him about Wei Zhao's proposal, the institute that would bear my name, and the difficult choice it presented. When I finished, my father was quiet for a moment. "Your mother would be beyond proud," he said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just of what you've accomplished, but of how you've done it, with integrity and purpose." Tears pricked at my eyes. In the years following my mother's death, my relationship with my father had been strained, both of us lost in our individual grief, unable to bridge the gap her absence had created. It was only in the past year, as I'd begun rebuilding my life, that we'd found our way back to each other. "I don't know what to do, Dad," I admitted. "The Institute is an incredible opportunity, but Sterling has given me so much." And then there's Maxwell. Ah, my father said knowingly. The heart complicates everything, doesn't it? He paused. You know, when your mother was offered that teaching position in Boston years ago, we faced a similar choice. It was her dream job, but it would have meant uprooting our family, my practice, everything we'd built. This was a story I'd never heard before. What happened? She turned it down for us, he said simply. She always said she never regretted it, that she found other ways to fulfill that part of herself. But sometimes, especially after you went to law school, I wondered if she carried a small what if in her heart. The revelation landed heavily. Had my mother sacrificed her own dreams for our family's stability? Had she truly never regretted it? Melissa, my father continued gently, when your mother died and you disappeared into your grief, my greatest fear wasn't that you would never practice law again. It was that you would never fully live again, that you would exist, but not thrive. His voice softened. Seeing you now, facing this kind of decision, a choice between two extraordinary paths, I know she would want you to choose with your whole heart, not out of obligation or fear. But how do I know which path is right? I asked, feeling suddenly like a child again, seeking parental wisdom. The right path, my father said thoughtfully, is the one that allows you to be most fully yourself, the one that honors both your gifts and your joy. He chuckled softly. And sometimes the right path isn't choosing between two options, but finding a third way that incorporates elements of both. After we hung up, I sat with his words, turning them over in my mind. A third way, not either or, but perhaps both and. The seed of an idea began to form. Ambitious, challenging, but potentially perfect. The next morning, I requested meetings with both Maxwell and Wei Jiao. I would present them with a counter-proposal, one that honored the spirit of Wei Jiao's offer, while creating something even more aligned with my personal vision. Maxwell arrived at my office first, his expression curious. You look like someone who's made a decision, he observed, taking the seat across from my desk. I have, I confirmed, but not the one you might expect. Wei Jiao joined us moments later, exchanging greetings before settling into the second visitor's chair. Ms. Blackwell has reached a conclusion regarding our proposal, Maxwell explained. I took a deep breath and laid out my vision. I'm deeply honored by the offer to lead the Jiao Blackwell Institute, I began. The mission resonates with everything I believe about how international business should function. However, I'd like to propose a modification to the structure. Both men listened intently as I outlined my counterproposal. Instead of being based in either China or America, the institute would be headquartered in a neutral third location, Singapore perhaps, or Geneva. Instead of requiring me to choose between Sterling Enterprises and the institute, I would serve as executive chairperson, guiding the institute's mission while maintaining my role as chief legal officer at Sterling on a modified schedule. Most importantly, I continued, the institute wouldn't be the Jiao Blackwell Institute. It would be the Eleanor Morgan Blackwell Institute for International Ethics, named for my mother, who sacrificed so much to give me the education and opportunities that made all of this possible. I turned to Wei Jiao. My mother never got to see what became of the potential she nurtured in me. This would ensure her name lives on through work that matters, creating ethical frameworks that protect both corporations and the people they impact. Wei Jiao's expression remained neutral, but his eyes warmed with understanding. Honoring ancestors through lasting contributions is deeply respected in my culture, he said. Your mother's name would inspire generations of legal scholars and practitioners. Maxwell leaned forward. The logistics of maintaining dual roles would be challenging, he noted, though his tone suggested he was intrigued rather than opposed. Challenging but not impossible, I countered. Sterling would benefit from being at the forefront of ethical international business practices. The institute would benefit from my continued real-world experience in corporate law. And I paused, allowing myself a moment of complete honesty. I would benefit from not having to choose between my professional vision and my personal attachments. My eyes met Maxwell's briefly, conveying the deeper meaning behind those words. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. It is an ambitious proposal, Wei Jiao observed. But ambition tempered by wisdom is how great achievements are born. He exchanged a glance with Maxwell. I believe this could work, if both organizations are committed to its success. The discussion continued for another hour, refining details and addressing potential obstacles. By the time we concluded, a A framework had emerged that satisfied all parties. A visionary institute that would honor my mother's memory while allowing me to maintain the life I had built at Sterling Enterprises. As Wei Chao departed for another appointment, Maxwell remained behind, waiting until the door closed before speaking. "The Eleanor Morgan Blackwell Institute," he said softly. "She would be honored beyond words." "I hope so," I replied, emotion catching in my throat. Everything I am, everything I've accomplished. It all began with her belief in me. Maxwell moved closer, professional distance momentarily forgotten. "You've created something remarkable here, Melissa. Not just for your mother's memory, but for yourself. For all of us." His voice dropped to a near whisper. "I'm selfishly glad your proposal allows you to stay in New York." I smiled, allowing myself to lean briefly into his strength. I couldn't imagine leaving now. Not when I've finally found my way back to myself. Not when we're just discovering what we might become together. 6 months later, I stood on a podium in Geneva, addressing the assembled dignitaries and legal scholars at the official launch of the Eleanor Morgan Blackwell Institute for International Ethics. The audience included representatives from major corporations and governments across 6 continents, all gathered to witness the beginning of what many were already calling a revolution in international business practices. "Ethics isn't just about following rules," I told them, my voice steady and confident. "It's about recognizing that behind every contract, every negotiation, every business decision are real human lives that will be affected by our choices." My mother taught me that principle long before I entered a law school classroom or a corporate boardroom. In the front row, my father sat beside Maxwell, both watching with unmistakable pride. Weija was there too, his normally impassive face displaying rare satisfaction at seeing our shared vision become reality. 2 years ago, I continued, I was at the lowest point of my life. Grief had stolen not just my mother, but my sense of purpose, my confidence in my abilities, my willingness to engage fully with the world. I paused, letting the personal admission resonate. I was pushing a cleaning cart through corporate offices at night, hiding from my own potential, believing that chapter of my life was closed forever. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Most knew my current position, but not the full story of my journey. Then came a moment of choice. Speak up or remain silent. Use my forgotten skills or watch injustice unfold. Step into the light or continue hiding in the shadows. I smiled, remembering that pivotal night in the Sterling conference room. The choice I made that evening led to a cascade of opportunities that ultimately bring us here today. I gestured to the Institute's elegant logo displayed behind me, my mother's initials woven into a design that symbolized connection across cultures and legal traditions. The Eleanor Morgan Blackwell Institute stands for the principle that ethical business is not just morally right, but strategically advantageous. That transparency builds stronger partnerships than deception. That considering human impact alongside profit margins creates sustainable success. I looked out at the assembled faces, feeling a profound sense of rightness. My mother never got to see me argue before a judge or negotiate a major contract. But through this institute, her influence will shape international business practices for generations to come. As applause filled the auditorium, I caught Maxwell's eye in the front row. His expression held everything we hadn't yet said to each other: pride, admiration, and a deepening love that had grown steadily over the months we'd worked together to bring this moment to fruition. Beside him, my father wiped tears from his eyes, nodding his approval of what his daughter had created to honor his wife's memory. The reception afterward was a blur of congratulations and introductions. Prominent attorneys, business leaders, and government officials all wanted to discuss potential collaborations with the Institute. Even Jackson Liu was there, now teaching business ethics at a respected university. Another story of redemption that had unfolded alongside my own. As the evening drew to a close, I slipped away from the crowd and found a quiet balcony overlooking Lake Geneva. The night air was cool against my skin as I gazed at the distant lights reflecting on the water. "There you are," Maxwell's voice came from behind me. "The woman of the hour, hiding from her admirers." I turned, smiling as he joined me at the railing, just taking a moment to process everything. "It's been quite a journey. From cleaning lady to institute founder," he agreed, sliding an arm around my waist. With a few dramatic revelations and career transformations along the way, I leaned into his embrace, remembering the night that had changed everything. Standing in that conference room, summoning the courage to speak in Mandarin when silence would have been easier. I never imagined that moment would lead to all of this. I did, Maxwell said softly. Not the specifics, perhaps, but the moment you stood up and revealed who you truly were, I knew you were extraordinary. He turned to face me, taking both my hands in his, and I've been falling in love with you ever since. The declaration, though not entirely unexpected given the growing closeness between us, still took my breath away. Even when I was scrubbing your office floors, I teased, deflecting slightly as I absorbed the emotion behind his words. Even then, you had more dignity and purpose than most of the executives I've known, he replied seriously. But watching you reclaim your power, rebuild your life, and now create this legacy, that's when admiration became something deeper. In the moonlight reflecting off the lake, Maxwell Sterling looked different from the imperious CEO who had ordered me to pose as his wife nearly 2 years ago. More vulnerable, more human, a man who had seen me at my lowest and my highest, and valued both. I love you too, I said simply, the words feeling right and true. Through all of this, the Institute, my return to law, rebuilding my relationship with my father, you've been my constant support. Never pushing, always believing in me. Maxwell reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. My heart skipped as he opened it to reveal a ring, not ostentatiously large, but exquisitely designed, with an emerald surrounded by diamonds. Melissa Blackwell, he said softly, you've transformed not just your own life but mine as well. You've shown me what true resilience looks like, what it means to lead with both brilliance and heart. He took a breath. I don't want to be just your CEO or even just your partner. I want to build a life with you, one that honors both our individual dreams and what we can create together. His eyes held mine, vulnerable and certain at once. Will you marry me? The moment stretched between us, filled with the weight of our shared journey, from employer and cleaning lady to colleagues to lovers, and now to this threshold of a deeper commitment. Yes, I whispered, my voice strong despite the tears gathering in my eyes. Yes, I will. As he slipped the ring onto my finger, I thought of my mother, how she would have loved this moment, this man, this life I had rebuilt from the ashes of grief. The Institute bearing her name was my public tribute to her memory, but this private joy, this second chance at love and fulfillment, this too honored what she had always wanted for me. Maxwell drew me into his arms, sealing our engagement with a kiss that promised a future neither of us could have imagined 2 years ago. When we parted, I looked up at the stars visible above the lake, feeling my mother's presence more strongly than I had in years. She would have adored you, I told Maxwell, leaning my head against his shoulder. I wish I could have met her, he replied. But I see her in you every day, in your determination, your compassion, your unwillingness to compromise on what matters. From the reception hall, I could hear my name being called. More congratulations to accept. More connections to make for the Institute's future. My father appeared at the balcony doorway, his face alight with happiness at finding us together. There you two are, he said, then noticed the ring glittering on my finger. His expression softened. Well, it seems congratulations are in order for more than just the Institute. As my father embraced us both, I felt the circle of my life completing itself. The grief that had once threatened to destroy me had ultimately transformed me, leading me through darkness to a light brighter than I could have imagined. My mother was gone, but her legacy lived on, not just in the Institute that bore her name, but in the woman I had become because of her love. Later that night, as Maxwell slept beside me in our hotel suite, I stood by the window looking out at the peaceful waters of Lake Geneva. In the glass, I caught my own reflection. No longer the hollow-eyed woman who had pushed a cleaning cart through empty offices, nor the uncertain attorney taking her first tentative steps back into professional life. The woman who gazed back at me now stood tall with quiet confidence, eyes bright with purpose and promise. We did it, Mom, I whispered to the night sky. Everything you believed I could be, everything you sacrificed to make possible. It wasn't wasted after all. A sense of peace settled over me, not the numbing emptiness I had mistaken for peace during my darkest days, but a genuine tranquility born of purpose fulfilled and love reclaimed. The cleaning lady who spoke Mandarin had saved more than just a corporate deal that night. She had saved herself, rediscovered her voice, and created a legacy that would touch countless lives. As I slipped back into bed beside the man who had seen my potential even when I was at my lowest, I knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly where I was meant to be, not despite the journey that had brought me here, but because of it. Every painful step, every loss, every moment of courage had led me to this new beginning. My mother had given me roots. Now I had found my wings, and they would carry me farther than either of us had ever dreamed possible.
If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.